The vast expanse of the Andromeda Galaxy rippled with celestial energy, and at its heart stood the legendary Nexus Prime, a floating city built within the heart of a dying star, its radiant core casting a kaleidoscope of colors across the void. The skyline was a jagged fusion of crystal spires and glowing nebulae, where gravity itself seemed to bend in unpredictable ways, creating an otherworldly dance of lights and shadows. Inside the Colosseum of Nexus Prime, an arena older than time itself, beings of unimaginable diversity congregated, towering insectoid creatures, with exoskeletons reflecting the shimmering plasma overhead, chattered in 1,000 voices that echoed through the stadium. The air crackled with a low hum of sentient beings made entirely of energy, their forms flickering like cosmic static. Below, humanoid figures adorned in sleek metallic armor glided effortlessly across the arena, their footsteps leaving trails of stardust in their wake. This wasn't just any event. It was a grand tournament of the multiverses, a century-old tradition where the finest minds and fiercest warriors from across the galaxies gathered to compete for the ultimate prize, the Quantum Nexus, a source of unimaginable power, capable of rewriting the laws of reality itself. But amidst a sea of otherworldly beings stood one individual, a human, barely above 5 feet tall. His eyes were wide with awe, his skin flushed with the energy of the moment. This was Alex Carter, the first human ever to make it this far in the tournament. And the entire universe was watching, unsure if a mere mortal could truly outsmart the universe itself. The stakes were high, but Alex wasn't here just to survive. He was here to prove that even the smallest spark of humanity could ignite a blaze capable of defying the most powerful forces in existence. Alex Carter stood at the edge of the preparation area, clutching a beat-up backpack slung over his shoulder like it was the most natural thing in the galaxy. His jeans were wrinkled, and his oversized hoodie, emblazoned with a faded Earth Sports logo, looked almost comical among the sleek, highly advanced attire of his competitors. While other participants meditated in silence, their forms floating in suspended serenity, Alex was busy scanning the room with wide eyes, seemingly oblivious to the pressure mounting around him. All right, he muttered to himself. Taking a swig from a half-empty bottle of water, he pulled from the depths of his backpack. This is a bit bigger than I expected. Around him, the others were engaged in intricate pre-battle rituals, calculating trajectories with holographic displays that floated in midair, adjusting neural interfaces, or consulting ancient tomes passed down through eons. But Alex, he was fiddling with his sneakers, tying them with concentration that could only be described as casual. A massive, serpentine being with glowing scales sidled past him, its tentacles shifting in the air, emanating a low hum. It shot Alex a look of disdain before returning to its pre-match preparation. Hey, anyone know where the nearest food court is? Alex asked, his voice casual, as though this were a trip to a local gym rather than the event of a lifetime. A chorus of incredulous stares followed his words. He grinned awkwardly at the attention. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt the, cosmic meditation. And all that, despite the disbelief in the air, there was something oddly magnetic about Alex's presence. He wasn't fazed by the galaxy's best warriors or the weight of expectation bearing down on him. He didn't even flinch when the arena's force fields flickered on, creating a dome of shimmering energy above the preparation room. His competitors were all highly trained, genetically enhanced beings from across the multiverse, each possessing powers and intellect far beyond anything Earth had ever known. They had spent centuries preparing for this moment, honing their bodies and minds to perfection. And yet, here was Alex, a regular guy from Earth, with nothing more than a sharp wit, a stubborn streak, and a knack for thinking on his feet. He wasn't intimidated. In fact, he was almost relaxed, and that was precisely what made him so dangerous. Alex Carter, the human who shouldn't have belonged here, had a simple belief that there was always a way to outsmart the system, even if the odds were stacked to impossible heights. As he swung his backpack over his shoulder and started towards the arena's entrance, he couldn't help but smirk. Let's see what the universe has got. The lights of the Colosseum dimmed, and a hushed silence fell over the arena as the audience braced for what was about to unfold. Above, a massive holographic screen flickered to life, displaying the faces of contenders. The familiar figures of legendary warriors from across the universe filled the screen, each one a symbol of excellence in their respective fields. Champions who had mastered the arts of combat, strategy, and manipulation of the very fabric of reality itself. And then, at the very bottom of the list, appeared the face of Alex Carter, the only human. His odds for victory were listed as statistical impossibility, written in bold letters with an exclamation mark that seemed to echo throughout the entire galaxy. Across the arena, at a secluded viewing platform, stood the reigning champion, Grandmaster Zorth, a being who had long been the undisputed ruler of the tournament of the multiverses. Zorth's form was a towering, obsidian-hued figure, clad in intricately woven battle armor that hummed with ancient power. His 4 arms moved with precise, fluid motions as he adjusted the ceremonial combat robes that signified his position. His eyes, glowing like burning stars, narrowed as he reviewed the profiles of this year's challengers. The data of each contender flashed before him, listing their victories, accolades, and special abilities. But his gaze lingered on one name, Alex Carter, a human, the first ever to qualify for the grand tournament. He scrolled through the details of the young Earthling, scanning for any sign of exceptional ability or strategic brilliance. What he found was underwhelming. No superhuman strength, no energy manipulation, no psychic prowess. Just a simple Earthling, seemingly out of place among the multiversal titans. A faint, sardonic chuckle escaped Zorth's lips. A mere child in a contest of gods. Behind him, his most trusted advisors shifted nervously, sensing the rising tension. Zorth had never been beaten in his 300-year reign. No one had ever dared to challenge his rule in such a bold manner. The very idea of a human disrupting the balance of power was laughable, yet here they were. Down below in the preparation area, Alex could feel the weight of the moment. He wasn't just facing an arena of warriors. He was facing an entire universe's expectation that he would fail. The odds were stacked against him in every conceivable way. Every opponent was more powerful, more skilled, and more ancient than anything he could comprehend. Yet, Alex was unfazed. He didn't need to be the strongest or the smartest. He just needed to think differently. He needed to outsmart them all. As he slipped his hands into the pockets of his hoodie, he caught a glimpse of Grandmaster Zorth's profile on the screen. The champion's eyes met his own through the digital interface. The challenge had been issued, but Alex was intimidated. In fact, he was almost amused. Well, guess I better bring my A game, Alex muttered to himself, knowing full well that in this universe, simply surviving would be the hardest challenge of all. As the tournament drew nearer, Alex stood in front of the preparation station, staring at the high-tech gear laid out before him. Around him, the other competitors meticulously fine-tuned their equipment, adjusting neural implants, syncing energy armor to their biosignatures, and running simulations of every possible outcome. It was the calm before the storm, a moment of perfect precision, where every warrior made sure they were fully prepared for the battle ahead. Alex, on the other hand, was rooting through his backpack, pulling out the most unremarkable items imaginable. A pair of worn-out sneakers, a half-crumpled energy bar, a packet of chewing gum. Finally, he unearthed his secret weapon, a tiny, old-school handheld gaming console that looked like it belonged in a museum rather than a futuristic arena. He held it up with a proud grin. Well, if the galaxy wants to see me play with the big leagues, I guess I better warm up, he said, his voice full of irreverence. Around him, the other competitors, beings from all walks of the multiverse, stopped mid-motion, their eyes collectively narrowing. They exchanged confused glances. An enormous being with 9 eyes and the body of a glowing jellyfish floated by, its tendrils vibrating with what might have been a chuckle. A crystalline warrior flickered, sending bursts of light like strobe flashes, clearly amused by the sight. Alex popped in a game cartridge, ignoring the rising whispers of doubt. "Gotta keep my reflexes sharp," he mumbled, his fingers moving at a speed that seemed unnatural as he furiously pressed buttons. Is this some form of Earth ritual? A nearby being asked in a puzzled, melodic voice. "Nope, just Tetris," Alex replied with a smirk, clearly enjoying the confusion. The energy-based beings around him pulsed with curiosity, their forms changing color in an effort to decipher his actions. One tried to mimic the movements of his fingers, but its intangible form flickered awkwardly, unable to grasp the rhythm. "Don't worry, it's a mental game," Alex said with a wink, not missing a beat as his character on the screen twisted into impossible configurations. While the galaxy's finest competitors were calculating odds and refining battle strategies, Alex Carter was huddled in a corner, playing a classic Earth game. And yet, his focus, casual demeanor, and utter lack of concern for the norms were having an effect. The competitors were getting distracted. Some were uncertain whether he was joking or truly that carefree. His unpredictability was his secret weapon. The moment was broken when one of the more intimidating figures, a hulking creature whose mass seemed to vibrate the air, approached him with a grunt. Human, it rumbled in a deep, guttural voice. "Are you really preparing for the tournament by playing games?" Alex didn't even look up, keeping his fingers glued to the buttons. "Absolutely," he said, sounding completely serious. "You'd be amazed at how strategic Tetris can be. You can't just focus on the now. You need to think several moves ahead." The creature blinked. Then, as if in a strange twist of fate, the other competitors started mimicking Alex. The crystalline warriors exchanged puzzled glances before trying to play, with their shimmering bodies, while an insectoid contender extended one of its many limbs to tap the holographic screen of Alex's gaming console, unsure if it would make any sense. A few moments passed, and then the competitor in question took a long pause before muttering to themselves, "This is stupidly effective. I'll never underestimate this Earthling again." Alex, oblivious to growing intrigue and quiet admiration, leaned back and exhaled. "All right, I think I'm ready for anything." The first match was a spectacle unlike anything Alex had ever experienced. The entire arena seemed to hum with anticipation, the energy crackling through the air as the towering figures of his opponents prepared. But Alex wasn't nervous. No, he was too busy fiddling with the straps on his sneakers. Across from him stood his first opponent, Craxer the Mindbender, a being whose entire existence was based on manipulating the thoughts and perceptions of others. His form was ethereal, an ever-shifting blur of glowing light, with shifting patterns that could confuse the sharpest of minds. Craxer had the ability to project his thoughts directly into his opponent's minds, weaving illusions and disorienting hallucinations that could drive anyone to madness. The crowd fell silent, all eyes on Alex, who was still tying his shoes. "You are about to face the most powerful mind manipulator in the galaxy," the announcer boomed, his voice reverberating across the stadium. "Do you have any final words before the match begins?" Alex straightened up, casually brushing off his hoodie. He looked around the arena and then at Craxer, who was already pulsing with colors, preparing to unleash a mental barrage. "Yeah," Alex said nonchalantly, cracking his knuckles. "I hope you like my playlist." With a flick of his wrist, Alex pulled out a small, inconspicuous device, a pocket-sized speaker, and hit the play button. The speakers crackled to life, blasting the most absurdly catchy Earth song, "I'm a Believer" by the Monkees. Craxer froze, his luminous form flickering with confusion. What is this technique? He thought, trying to override the barrage of music flooding his mind. The song was so simple, so relentlessly cheerful, that it threw off Craxer's mental patterns entirely. The hypnotic melody was the last thing he had anticipated. The Mindbender's attempts to create illusions faltered as his thoughts collided with incongruous upbeat rhythms. It was like trying to weave a nightmare while stuck in a constant loop of sugary pop. Alex grinned as he danced the beat, his casual attitude completely throwing Craxer off balance. "See? You gotta have the right vibe to keep it all together." The arena shook with laughter from the audience as Craxer's lights flickered wildly in frustration. His telepathic control was slipping, unable to handle the relentless onslaught of cheerful tunes. In a last-ditch effort, Craxer attempted to create an illusion of 1,000 terrifying monsters closing in on Alex. But the music was so infectious that Alex simply shrugged and kept dancing, the illusion fading into nonsensical shapes that only added to the ridiculousness of the moment. With one final laugh and a swipe of his hand, Alex dismissed the Mindbender's illusion, causing Craxer to flicker out of existence, defeated not by brute force but by something entirely unexpected. Human irreverence and the power of a good beat. In the next round, Alex faced Thyrax, the pyromancer, a creature with the power to summon and control fire so intense that it could melt through metal. His body radiated heat, and his eyes glowed like twin suns as he raised his hand, ready to ignite the entire arena. But Alex didn't even flinch. Instead, he pulled out an odd object from his bag, a simple, unassuming laser pointer. Thyrax sneered, flames already licking at the edges of his fingers. "You think you can defeat me with that?" Alex simply flicked the laser pointer on and aimed it directly at Thyrax's chest, the tiny red that danced across the opponent's fiery surface. And for some reason, it sent him into a frenzy. Thyrax, the master of flames, couldn't resist the urge to chase the little red, darting his hands and feet in every direction as he tried to stamp it out. The crowd gasped in disbelief as Thyrax, overwhelmed by the tiny light, forgot all about his fire manipulation. His flame sputtered out of control as he tried to catch the slipping and falling in a fit of frustration. "I'll admit, this isn't how I thought I'd go down," Alex said, watching as Thyrax tripped over his own feet in a hilarious display of confusion. The match ended when the pyromancer, now completely winded, collapsed on the ground, utterly defeated by a small laser pointer. By the time Alex made it to his third match, word had spread about his unconventional methods. The Cthulhian juggernaut, a hulking figure of pure muscle, towering at nearly 12 feet tall and covered in jagged, armored plating, stomped into the arena. His bellowing voice shook the air as he announced, "None can defeat me. I crush all who stand before me." But Alex wasn't impressed. As the massive Cthulhian charged at it with the force of a meteor, Alex calmly pulled out a foam dart blaster. "Okay, big guy," Alex said with a smirk. "You want to charge me? Let's see if you can catch this." He fired a foam dart straight into the Juggernaut's face. The massive creature stopped dead in his tracks, blinking in disbelief. The dart had hit him right between his eyes, and for some inexplicable reason, it triggered an unanticipated response. The Juggernaut stood there, completely frozen, unable to comprehend the absurdity of being hit by something so trivial. "Come on," Alex taunted. "You can't even dodge a foam dart?" The Juggernaut, now visibly shaking in confusion, charged again. But this time, Alex was ready. He launched a barrage of foam darts, each one finding its mark on the armored figure. The crowd roared with laughter as the seemingly invincible Juggernaut was brought down, not by physical strength, but by a relentless barrage of harmless foam. As the rounds progressed, Alex's unpredictable style, from mind-bending music to laser pointers and foam darts, became his signature. He had no fancy powers, no cosmic weapons, no ancient techniques. But what he did have was creativity and unshakable confidence, and the ability to see through the grandiose tactics of his opponents. And with each match, the universe was forced to reckon with a simple truth. Humanity, in all its absurdity, could outsmart even the most powerful forces in existence. Grandmaster Zora stood alone in the observation chamber, his eyes fixed on the holographic screen before him. The arena, filled with the screams and roars of spectators, now showcased the latest round of the tournament. And the human, Alex Carter, was once again defying the impossible. Zora had watched each of Alex's matches carefully, his intense gaze unblinking as the human engaged in each ridiculous, unorthodox tactic. The crystalline energy being, cracks of the mind-bender, had been defeated by cheerful earth music. The fire-wielding pyromancer had been outwitted by a laser pointer. The hulking Cthulhian juggernaut had been felled by foam darts. It was the absurd, preposterous. Zoratha's hands twitched, his forearms flexing involuntarily. He was not a creature who was accustomed to surprise. For centuries, he had fought in the highest echelons of the galaxy's most deadly tournaments. His tactics were flawless, his battle style perfect, a seamless blend of strategy, raw power, and ancient combat wisdom. He had crushed opponents across countless worlds, and he'd watched civilizations rise and fall. Nothing ever caught him off guard. But this human was different. Zoratha's eyes narrowed as he watched Alex, still carefree, cracking jokes after each improbable victory. How was it possible for a simple human, one without the refined battle techniques of his race or the vast array of cosmic power possessed by the other competitors, to be causing this much chaos? He's not even playing by the rules, Zorth muttered to himself, his voice low and almost inaudible. He stood taller now, his form shifting and rippling with a slow pulse of energy as his thoughts churned in confusion. He's not breaking the rules. Zorth's glowing eyes flickered, his normally steady pulse of energy rising as he replayed Alex's last match against the pyromancer. The sight of the tiny red from a laser pointer confusing an opponent whose power could burn through stars was still etched in his mind. The creature had looked utterly ridiculous, chasing with all the desperation of a child trying to catch fireflies. Zorth's scales, usually calm and still, began to ripple in patterns of agitation. He studied the human's every move, scrutinizing his every action. Each match seemed more absurd than the last, yet Alex kept winning, always with the most unexpected, almost juvenile tactics. Zorth's four arms flexed again, this time with a bit more force, a touch of frustration now bleeding into his calm demeanor. This wasn't a fight. He had fought countless skilled beings, warriors who bent the laws of physics, who could manipulate time and space, who wielded weapons of unimaginable destruction. And yet, this human was breaking the very foundation of what combat meant. He was not adhering to tradition. He was not engaging in the art of battle, as it had been taught for millennia. He wasn't playing the game, he was rewriting it. The thought unsettled Zorth. It unsettled him deeply. Why is he laughing? Zorth asked aloud, his voice cold and full of disbelief. Why is he so casual about this? Does he not realize the stakes? Does he not understand the gravity of the situation? Zorth clenched his fists, his mind whirling with growing anxiety. The human had no respect for tradition, no respect for the sanctity of combat. In the great tournaments of old, there was always a rhythm, a flow, a structure to each fight. Strategy, power, and respect for one's opponent were the cornerstones of victory. There were rules, unwritten but known by all. Those who did not respect the traditions would falter. But Alex Carter? He was like a disruptive force of nature, an unpredictable whirlwind that refused to follow any pattern. He didn't care about tradition or respect. To him, combat was a game, one he played by his own, laughable rules. And it was working. Zorth felt the stirrings of an unfamiliar emotion, doubt. This human was now too far into the tournament. The stakes were too high, and his unpredictability had become a serious threat. Alex wasn't just winning matches. He was systematically undermining everything Zorth stood for in combat. Zorth had based his entire identity on being the pinnacle of strategic brilliance. And now, this human, this earthling, was slowly chipping away at the very foundation of his greatness. No matter what, I will end this, Zorth said, his voice colder now, his thoughts sharpening with the clarity of a man facing an existential challenge. He was no longer simply fighting for victory. He was fighting to preserve the very essence of his legacy. He would break Alex Carter. He would show this human that there were forces beyond his comprehension, beyond his childish tricks. But deep down in the furrow of his brow and the rare flicker of unease in his eyes, Zorth knew one painful truth. This human was no longer a joke. The roar of the crowd echoed to the colossal arena as the semi-final matches drew to a close. Across the galaxy, across all known star systems, every sentient being who could afford a ticket had tuned in. Even those who couldn't, who were stuck in backwater planets or under the heavy regulations of isolated empires, found a way to witness the spectacle. This tournament had become the event of the millennium. But now, as the final moment of the semifinals played out, the universe's collective attention turned to the human, Alex Carter, the earthling who had no technique, no cosmic powers, and no respect for tradition. The betting markets had exploded after his latest victory, a victory over a genetically enhanced warrior capable of turning invisible at will, which Alex had countered with nothing more than a glow-in-the-dark frisbee. The odds had completely collapsed. Everywhere, across the galactic networks, the message flashed. Error does not compute. Across the galaxy, spectating crowds gawked in disbelief. Was it possible? Could a human truly defeat beings capable of bending time, of harnessing the raw power of stars? The universe's finest warriors, the strongest species ever to exist. And yet here was this one earthling, casually advancing in the tournament without so much as breaking a sweat. I still don't get it, one spectator muttered, his multiple eyes narrowing as he watched Alex's victory replay on a screen above. This human, he's got no technique. He doesn't even fight like anyone else. He's a joke. A nearby Thriaxian diplomat, whose species had won countless tournaments across the universe, chimed in with a huff. The thing is, it's working. No one can predict what he's going to do next. And that's terrifying. There's nothing like it in combat history. The murmurs swirled as the final confrontation loomed. Alex was about to face Zorth, the Grand Master of the tournament, a being whose very presence was synonymous with dominance and victory. The galaxy's greatest minds had already written a human off as a fluke, a temporary distraction, but they were beginning to wonder if they were wrong. Could Alex truly win? Could he actually do the unthinkable and outsmart the universe's most feared warrior? Inside the preparation area, the atmosphere was thick with uncertainty. Other competitors, once so confident of their prowess, now looked at Alex with a mixture of disbelief and suspicion. Some were perplexed, others anxious, but none dared to underestimate him now. One such competitor, a bioengineered combat specialist named Ulfic, had spent years perfecting his mental and physical conditioning. His enhancements were beyond anything Alex had ever seen. Yet as he watched Alex carelessly pop open a packet of peanuts and toss them into his mouth, a flicker of doubt crossed his mind. How can he be so casual? Ulfic thought, his enhanced senses tracking every movement of the human. He was about to face the human in the final round, and though he had seen competitors with far greater power, there was a nagging feeling in the back of his mind. Could I actually lose? A soft, sarcastic chuckle came from across the room, and Alex looked up. Don't worry, Ulfic. I'm not here to steal your thunder, Alex said, his voice laced with his usual irreverence. I'm just trying to figure out where to find the best food on this space station. Do you know if there's a good deli around here? Ulfic, despite his genetic enhancements, just stared at him, his fists clenching involuntarily. You think you're funny, human? You think this is a joke? Alex grinned and shrugged. I think it's a game, my friend. And so far, it's been a hell of a ride. As the match began, the audience fell into a tense silence. The final round was like no other, a battle not only for the championship, but for the very reputation of the tournament itself. The stakes were now higher than they had ever been. Zorth, the embodiment of combat tradition, faced a being who didn't even take his powers seriously. It was a clash between two worlds, the ancient ways of battle and the chaotic unpredictability of human instinct. Zorth stood tall, his energy rippling like a storm contained in the body of a master. He had studied Alex's every move, and now he was determined to crush him with the full weight of centuries of combat expertise. As the bell rang to signal the start of the final match, Zorth wasted no time, launching a flurry of energy blasts at Alex, each one capable of obliterating entire continents. The audience held their breath, waiting for the inevitable, but Alex, he stood still, eyes wide as if completely unfazed. Then, with a sudden movement, he ducked, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of evading or blocking the blast, he leapt forward, narrowly dodging one attack, then reached into his bag. Without warning, he pulled out a water balloon launcher. All right, buddy, Alex said with a grin. Time to cool off. He let the first balloon fly. It sailed through the air in a perfect arc, landing right at Zorth's feet and splashing with a wet, cold explosion. The crowd went silent. Even Zorth paused, staring at the water balloon in stunned disbelief. What was this? Then Alex launched another one and another. The balloons exploded against Zorth's body, momentarily short-circuiting his energy field and sending a ripple of confusion to the Grandmaster. You can't be serious, Zorth growled, his aura flaring with heat as he tried to retaliate. But each time, Alex was just a step ahead, using his bizarre arsenal to keep Zorth off balance. The tension was unbearable. The spectators could scarcely believe what they were witnessing. This was a fight unlike any other. Back in the viewing chambers, the officials exchanged worried glances. The established order of this tournament was falling apart. Rules were being bent. The traditions that had defined combat for millennia were crumbling, and now even the most skilled warriors didn't know how to react. Alex Carter was turning the greatest battle in the galaxy into a chaotic, unpredictable game. What is he doing? one official whispered, unable to mask the disbelief in his voice. "He's not just fighting Zorth. He's fighting the entire idea of combat," another muttered, the realization dawning on them. And as the battle raged on, with Alex outwitting Zorth at every turn, one thought echoed to the minds of every spectator. Could this really be happening? Could a human, a simple, unpredictable earthling, truly defy the odds and outsmart the universe itself? The arena was electric with anticipation. The tension in the air could be felt in every corner of Nexus Prime. The greatest battle in the history of the galaxy was about to unfold. On one side stood Zorth, the Grandmaster, the living embodiment of tradition, discipline, and untold centuries of combat prowess. His 4 arms shifted with precision, each movement as calculated as the workings of a well-oiled machine. His skin shimmered with the light of 1,000 stars, his aura crackling with raw, unyielding energy. Every inch of him screamed perfection, his mastery over the art of combat unparalleled. On the other side, Alex Carter, the human who defied all odds and shattered every expectation. He was still in his standard Earth attire, a simple t-shirt and cargo pants, his expression casual, almost nonchalant. In one hand, he held a half-empty water bottle, and in the other, a quirky assortment of tools, none of which looked remotely like weapons. The contrast was jarring. "You're out of your depth, human," Zortha's voice boomed. His words resonated with authority as he raised one of his arms, summoning an array of shimmering, complex energy formations around him. "This is no game. This is the culmination of millennia of tradition. You stand no chance against me." Alex just shrugged, his smile never faltering. "I wouldn't be so sure. I've been pretty lucky so far, right?" He cracked open the water bottle and took a sip, completely unfazed. The crowd held its collective breath as the countdown began. 5 seconds for seconds, 3, and then, without warning, Zorth unleashed his opening move, a surge of temporal energy that bent the fabric of reality. Time itself seemed to ripple and twist, forming intricate loops that snapped back upon themselves in mesmerizing, chaotic patterns. It was a display of sheer power and control, a deadly temporal mandala that trapped opponents in an endless loop of disorientation. The crowd gasped. This was one of Zortha's most feared techniques, one that had incapacitated even the most powerful of adversaries. The very fabric of time itself was his weapon. But Alex simply pulled out his phone. "Hold on," he muttered, tapping on the screen as though he were searching for an app. The energy in the arena seemed to pause for a moment. Zortha's heart raced with a surge of irritation. Was he seriously checking his phone in the middle of the fight? And then Alex smiled. Found it. He tapped a few more times, and then held the phone up in front of him, playing a soft click-clack-clack sound from the phone speakers, the unmistakable noise of a metronome. The crowd blinked in confusion. Zorth, however, didn't have time to question it. He was caught off guard as his temporal construct, the intricate loops of time, began to falter. The resonant frequency from a metronome interfered with the very fabric of the temporal field, causing it to collapse in on itself. The time loops faltered, twisted, and unraveled, as though their very existence had been challenged by something as simple as a rhythmic click. Zortha's mouth twitched in disbelief. "What? How is this possible?" "Turns out," Alex said with a grin, "resonant frequencies work wonders in temporal constructs." "Who knew?" With a flick of his wrist, Alex tossed the metronome app aside, and suddenly the air around him crackled with energy. Without missing a beat, he lunged forward, dodging Zortha's retaliatory energy blast with an agility that defied all logic. The human was everywhere at once, a blur of motion, a streak of chaotic, unpredictable energy. Zortha's precise strikes met only empty space as Alex's movements flowed like water, graceful and spontaneous, defying any logical pattern. Zortha's mind raced. He could feel his control slipping. This is supposed to be my fight. This human should have been eliminated long ago. How is he doing this? In a fit of frustration, Zorth expanded his form, his energy surging outward in a massive wave. The entire arena shook as the power of 1,000 suns was unleashed in a single, explosive attack. Alex, however, simply grinned and pointed to his side. "Watch out for that." Zortha's eyes darted to his left, just in time to see Alex casually tossing a pie at his face. A cherry pie, its gooey filling splattering across Zortha's pristine, glowing body. The crowd erupted into laughter and shock, and even Zorth faltered for a brief moment, the energy around him dimming as the pie dripped down his face. It wasn't the humiliation that stung. It was the absurdity of it. How could this human be so ridiculous? But then, as Zorth wiped the pie from his face in confusion, Alex was already in motion again, sliding underneath him, tossing what appeared to be a banana peel onto the floor. Zortha's foot slipped, and he stumbled. Alex didn't hesitate. He launched into an acrobatic flip, kicking off Zortha's chest and sending him sprawling backward. Oops. Guess I should have cleaned up after myself, Alex quipped. Zorth growled, his body radiating power once more, this time with the force of 100 storms. Enough of this nonsense, he roared. But Alex wasn't done. With a flourish, he grabbed a small, handheld device from his belt and pointed at the ground. Suddenly, a giant trampoline appeared beneath them. Before Zorth could react, Alex slammed a button, sending both himself and the Grandmaster soaring high into the air, the trampoline sending them spiraling upwards like a pair of erratic meteors. The crowd gasped in disbelief. Zortha's control wavered again, as the sheer unpredictability of the situation gnawed at his tactical mind. There was no pattern here, no strategy to follow. This wasn't a fight. This was chaos. And in the heart of chaos, Alex Carter thrived. As the two fell toward the ground in a disorienting spiral, Alex twisted in midair, releasing an absurdly oversized foam dart gun from his belt. With a flourish, he fired, the dart hitting Zorth square in the chest. Gotcha, Alex said, landing softly in a perfect crouch as Zorth slammed into the arena floor with a tremendous crash. For a long moment, the arena was silent. Zorth lay still, groaning, the foam dart lodged in his chest as the remnants of the chaos dissipated. Alex stood there, smiling brightly, his posture relaxed and confident. And then, slowly, the roar of the crowd erupted, a wave of disbelief and awe washing over the arena. Alex Carter had done it. He had won. Zorth struggled to his feet, the sting of his defeat evident on his face. He could barely comprehend what had just happened. But one thing was clear now. The universe had been outsmarted, and the human, he was the one who had done the unthinkable. The roar of the crowd was deafening. The galaxy's greatest warriors, the most intelligent species in the universe, all stood in stunned silence as Alex Carter, the human, stood victorious in the arena. He was still wearing the same simple t-shirt and cargo pants, the expression on his face one of casual amusement. A small, crooked smile played on his lips as he waved to the ecstatic spectators. Zorth, the legendary Grandmaster, lay defeated on the ground, his energy flickering and slowly dissipating like a star losing its light. The Grandmaster's body was covered in foam dart residue and pie remnants, his flawless aura dimmed and humbled. The once unassailable leader of the tournament was now just another casualty of the universe's most unpredictable force. Alex Carter, the Earthling who had disrupted the very fabric of combat. As the officials began their process of declaring the human the winner, Zixo, the enigmatic elder who had been watching from the sidelines, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His centuries-old scales rippled with thought as the weight of the moment settled on him. Zixo, an embodiment of tradition, now found himself facing an undeniable truth. Alex's chaotic, unpredictable methods had shattered not only the tournament, but the very notion of what perfection in combat meant. Perfection doesn't leave room for evolution, Zixo admitted quietly, his voice carrying a tone of reluctant understanding. He turned his gaze to the defeated Zorth, then to Alex, who was casually leaning against the edge of the arena, now enjoying a bag of snacks he had pulled out of his jacket. Alex, hearing Zixo's words, looked up with a grin. Exactly, he said, popping a handful of chips into his mouth. Rules aren't limits, they're opportunities. Zixo's multifaceted eyes narrowed, reflecting 1,000 years of wisdom, before he nodded. I see now. It was never about following the rules. It was about breaking them, about finding the gaps where tradition falters and filling them with unpredictability. Alex chuckled and wiped a bit of chip dust off his shirt. I guess that's one way to put it. Honestly, I was just trying to survive out there. But Hey, if it made you think differently, I'm happy to have helped. There was a long pause as the galaxy's finest officials, all one certain that the universe's order will remain unchallenged, began to process what had just happened. Alex's unorthodox methods had upended centuries of tradition and tactical expectations. He hadn't fought by the book. He had written his own. He hadn't used overwhelming strength or ancient techniques. He had used laughter, chaos, and sheer unpredictability. And it had worked. I thought I had seen it all, Zixo continued, his tone now thoughtful. But I realize now that I have not been truly looking at the universe, just at my own rigid beliefs. Perhaps it's time to evolve. Alex turned toward the crowd, who were still cheering, their voices filled with awe. It's not about being perfect or flawless, right? It's about embracing the chaos and adapting. We're all here to learn something new, even if that something is a little weird. The announcer's voice rang out, acknowledging Alex's victory, but the true impact of this moment was not just in the prize or the title. It was in the shift that had just occurred in the very nature of this intergalactic tournament, and perhaps in the way people viewed combat itself. What Alex had done wasn't just challenge a champion. He had challenged the entire system. By refusing to conform to established patterns, he had demonstrated the power of flexibility, of change, of finding new ways to think, act, and succeed. Alex glanced up at the stars above, his mind reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. He had come from a small, insignificant planet in a far corner of the universe, a human, no different from billions of others on Earth. And yet, here he was, a symbol of change, a living testament to the idea that sometimes breaking the rules was the best way to win. As he looked around at the arena, at the faces of competitors, spectators, and officials alike, one thing was clear. The universe had just learned a valuable lesson, that no matter how entrenched the system might be, there was always room for something new to emerge, even if that something was a quirky human with a strange sense of humor. Well, Alex said with a grin, stepping forward, looks like we got some work to do. I'm sure we can make this tournament a little more interesting next year, don't you think? The crowd cheered again, and this time, their applause carried not just admiration for his victory, but for the way Alex had rewritten the rules of the game itself. As the lights dimmed and the arena began to empty, Zixo lingered, his mind deep in thought. The universe had always been ruled by tradition, by mastery, by perfection. But now, it was something different. It was malleable, unpredictable, and full of infinite possibility. Alex had not just outsmarted the universe. He had shown that sometimes chaos was the greatest tool of all, and that in itself was the greatest victory of all. As the dust settled on the arena and the echoes of the crowd's roaring cheers faded into a vast expanse of Nexus Prime, Adrian Chin stood at the center, the improbable champion. The victory was his, but the universe was not done with him yet. While the galaxy had just witnessed a human defy centuries of tradition and upend what it thought was possible, Adrian's eyes were already scanning the horizon. The universe was vast, full of challenges, and he had barely scratched the surface. Back on Earth, a simple message pinged to the Federation's secure channels, sent by none other than Adrian himself. The text was short, to the point, and as characteristic of him as ever. Mission accomplished. Send the rest. In the control rooms of combat academies and military headquarters across the galaxy, alarms blared. Strategic analysis algorithms had been activated, and combat schools, both military and underground, had already begun adjusting their curricula. Species that had once believed themselves invincible now found themselves preparing for something they had never anticipated. The humans had arrived, and somewhere on a distant planet far beyond the reach of Nexus Prime, a small figure stood at the helm of a sleek, advanced ship. A new recruit, eager to follow in Adrian's footsteps, turned to their mentor and asked, "What do we do next?" The mentor smiled, eyes gleaming with a spark of excitement. "We find the next challenger." Adrian's triumph had been only the beginning. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, but now they would have to contend with a new force, one that defied tradition, broke the rules, and made its own path forward. And who knew? The next battle might not be on a grand stage, but somewhere in the hidden corners of space, where the unexpected was the only thing certain. After all, chaos was just the beginning.